Afternoon, everybody. As we mentioned yesterday, we were going to give another report, an update today on what we're finding as a result of the remnants of the typhoon that hit Western Alaska and in the northern part of Alaska, up by Kotzebue, Point Hope, and Kivalina. The storm is still there. Weather reports seem to indicate that it's going to hang out in that area for a while, and we're going to be monitoring that storm to see if there's going to be any additional damage. We certainly know that the water levels are up in that part of the state of Alaska. Going further south, where there was definitely more damage, we're looking at, as of this moment, at least 5 communities that have been impacted greatly. Combination of high water, flooding, erosion, electrical issues, issues with the airport, et cetera. And so those communities, obviously, as we mentioned yesterday, would be Hooper Bay, Scammon Bay, Gullivan, Newtok, and Nome have damage. And these are going to be villages that obviously we're assessing in more detail as we speak. We have airport issues, for example, also at Shaktoolik that we're aware of. Power's out at the airport, or was at the last report in Gullivan, Unalakleet, Hooper Bay, Scammon Bay. And there's been a water boil advisory for at least 3 communities, that being Elam, Unalakleet, and Hooper Bay. So we're working through our assessment. Obviously, the storm had a great impact on that part of the state. We've got people focused on making sure that we get a complete assessment ASAP. We would anticipate that by tomorrow, we will be marshaling resources that'll quickly be on the ground, and we'll begin the process of helping people recover from this quickly. As mentioned yesterday, we have about 3 weeks before freeze up. We're very cognizant of that, so we're going to move as quickly as possible. And we'll be focusing on the communities that have really received damage and really need the help the most. But all communities will be reviewed, and wherever there is help that is needed, we'll be getting that help there as soon as possible. At this point, what we'll do is I think we're going to turn this over to Brian to give a little more detail. Then we'll go to General Sachs, then May Kohler with DEC, and then we'll open up for questions. So, Brian?
Thank you, Governor. Brian Fisher with the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. So in addition to what the governor had said there, the current reports from the National Weather Service show that this storm is going to linger off the kind of north of Point Hope in the Chukchi Sea. So the storm is going to be around for a little while. The good news is that both the wind and wave heights that have occurred that we saw further south in the Bering Strait and the Bering Sea, not as significant. However, the water is going to remain high, particularly above the normal high tide line, for as long as a day or two into Tuesday in some communities in eastern Norton Sound and up at Kotzebue Sound and a little bit north of that. I think good news is that we have been in contact with the National Weather Service. The typhoon that was impacting Japan tomorrow, it doesn't sound like it's going to impact Alaska at all. It looks like that typhoon is going to break up down near Japan, so that's good news for us. We don't have a second significant storm that's heading our way. In addition to the damages that the governor spoke about just a minute ago, we'll be having folks deploying tomorrow. It'll be teams made up of state emergency management professionals as well as the American Red Cross. Yesterday I mentioned they deployed a team up from the lower 48, about 15 different states. And those teams will be going out starting tomorrow to visit communities on the ground to get the real needs assessment in terms of what's needed for water, food, shelter for the communities that have impacted. And that'll be across the entire area of the storm. So that process will be beginning tomorrow. Next steps from that, kind of the longer term look at repairs for individuals' homes. Once we identify needs for things, for example, plywood and roofing material and insulation to replace the stuff that was damaged from floodwaters, as soon as we get those accurate counts and needs, we'll be able to send those materials west to have folks be able to button up their homes that have been damaged by the floodwaters and winds pretty early on. So that'll be our first go about those assessments on the ground and getting the food, water, and preliminary building materials moving this week out there to begin repairs. Further on from that, we are continuing to work with FEMA. FEMA is here and has funding available through what's called their surge account to send personnel and materials up here to assist us at this point. Well, through these assessments that we're doing, we'll be able to move forward with a request for federal assistance for the long-term financial needs that we'll have and the communities will have for rebuilding and reconstructing to get through this back to semblance of normalcy after all the damage that we saw. So with that, I will turn it over to Commissioner Torrance Sachs, the Adjutant General for the Alaska National Guard. Sir.
Thanks. As I mentioned yesterday, there is going to be a military force going into the area. Just to show you on the map, we are activating all guardsmen and state defense force in the entire western region. We are also going to have guardsmen, state defense force in Hooper Bay, in Nome, and in Bethel. And the verbal activation has already started, and more detail to follow. We're doing what's called the spoke and wheel concept. So we want the folks in the villages, they can help there, but we also want to go out to those hubs so we can get out to the local areas more quickly. Some of the duties are going to be search and rescue, debris removal, and just helping with community damage assessments. So I'm sure there will be more things that we will do, but there's a start. It is critical to have boots on the ground, so we want to start this today. More air assets are moving into the area. I'm going to have 3 helicopters in Nome and 1 in Bethel, and the big aircraft, C-17, C-130, those are going to be on standby as well. So we are getting assets into the area starting today. And with that, we will pass it on to Conservation.
Hi, Meg Kohler with Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation. We spoke yesterday, Commissioner Bruni, about water and drinking water. We are continuing to work with our partners in region to assess and provide technical assistance and identify needs to be poised to rapidly respond alongside DMVA and our other partners. From a spill prevention and response perspective, we've received no additional formal spill reports at this time outside of the one mentioned yesterday in Nome. That being said, we are reaching out to our regulated facilities as well as the other tank farms in the area to make sure that we understand what is happening on the ground. And at this point, we're receiving some reports of damages, but otherwise, many of our tank farms are in good shape. And now I'll pass to Commissioner Ryan.
Ryan Anderson, online. We can't hear you, Ryan. You're going to have to turn up your mic or somewhere. We're going to have to get some volume. No. Okay, Ryan, you're going to have to try and turn it up. If not, we're going to have to... So, okay, we'll try and get back to the commissioner. Before we go to questions, just real quick also, it was reported yesterday that an individual was missing, a young child. That individual has been found. So as of today, at this moment, we don't have reports of anyone that was that lost their life during this event, severely injured during this event, and we don't have reports of anyone still missing as a result of this event. So at this stage of the game, this is a property issue. This is a recovery issue. Certainly fuel, food, water, electricity, erosion, and roads are things we're going to be looking at and working on very quickly. But that until we get Commissioner Ryan Anderson back online, Jeff, if you want to start with the questions, we can do that.
know that up in Shaktoolik, their berm kind of washed into the sea, and I imagine other communities have had damage to sort of seawall type, infrastructure. So I'm wondering how much of a priority is it to get that stuff fixed as, people are going out in the communities in the event that there is kind of another big storm this week?
Yeah, exactly. Very much a priority. And that's some of the stuff that we're working on, working on. And that's one of the issues that Commissioner Anderson will talk about once he gets online. But the erosion, the roads, impact to roads, and any type of structures that have been impacted because of the storm, obviously those are things we're going to be looking at. But the erosion is something we're talking about, and we know we need to get working on that here pretty quick.
Okay, and our next question is from Yex Yelverton with Alaska's News Source.
Thank you. Hello, Governor. Obviously, you guys have been doing a lot, and I wanted to know, how do you feel your response has been so far to this event?
Well, again, no loss of life, no major injuries at this point, nobody missing at this point. When you compare something like this to what occurs in Texas, Louisiana, Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, that have been prepared, that experience hurricanes almost on a continual basis, you inevitably have injuries, you inevitably have loss of life, even in those states that prep for this all the time. So for us here in Alaska, not to have loss of life injuries, those missing, I think is a very good thing. This is an act of God. This is an act of nature. This was widespread over 1,000 miles. And Alaska, once again, as we mentioned yesterday, we have to deal with some of these natural disasters, it seems, on a regular basis, whether it's fires, earthquakes, even volcanoes, and certainly weather events. So our response right now is the recovery part, which is, we hope, is going to move very quickly because, again, we aren't searching for folks. We aren't having to, thank God, look for individuals that are deceased, et cetera. So we're moving as quickly as possible. We're going to make sure that this response moves very rapidly. We know we have to get things back to where they were before freeze up. So it's going to take a little bit of time, but we're going to move pretty quick on this.
Last question in the room comes from Zachariah Hughes with the Anchorage Daily News.
Are you guys assessing a federal emergency
Yes.
request at this point?
Yes, we are. Yep.
And what'll go along with that? The state resources are unlocked as of yesterday, but with the federal declaration, what does that do in the next couple days before we move into long-term recovery?
Brian will talk about that.
Thanks for that. So in the next couple of days, we're going to be working with them to do the assessment piece. But once we make the request for federal assistance and that comes in, that's really a backstop and will provide additional financial support. The governor's disaster programs that have been activated since Saturday morning will provide essentially the upfront cash to do this response, to repair utilities, to repair homes. And if we move forward with FEMA, both on the infrastructure side and for homeowners, if that's approved by the president, then that'll be additional financial resources that will come to bear for the long-term rebuilding and recovery.
So for the next couple weeks, it'll be state money that's kind of paying for some of the repair work, but the federal declaration will unlock some of that FEMA fund that comes in and pays the
Exactly.
back.
That's correct. So the funding will come primarily from the state right now under the governor's declaration, and moving into the future, FEMA will reimburse us for some of those costs. There's usually a share between 75% FEMA will reimburse us, and the 25% the state will continue to pick up in the long term. But it'll be on the back end that financial assistance will be coming this way.
Okay, now we're going to take questions online. Let's start with Anna Rose MacArthur at KYUK Public Radio in Bethel.
Hi, thank you. I'd like to get more specifics about the response for Hooper Bay. How many Guards people are set to arrive in Hooper Bay today, and then how many tomorrow and ultimately by the end of the week? Thanks.
As far as the Guardsmen going to Hooper Bay, our goal is around 10. We're going to have some in Bethel and Nome, as I mentioned as well. So we'll have a sizable contingent, but it really is needs-based. Once we get there, we'll see exactly what is needed. If more is needed, we'll get more on the ground.
Okay, now let's go to Nina Kravinsky at KYUK Public Radio in Bethel. Nina?
Hi, thanks. So my question is also about Hooper Bay. The assistant principal at the school there says they're providing 1,000 meals a day. What specific support is the state providing to schools across the coast that are sheltering people right now?
That's part of the assessment. As soon as that's complete, hopefully by tomorrow, we'll be doing everything we can to provide food, water, fuel, whatever it takes, once again, to get these communities back on their feet. So that's part of it. We'll know more here tonight and tomorrow morning, and then we'll start getting supplies out there, including food.
All right, up next, we have Sean McGuire with Anchorage Daily News. Sean?
Governor, we know that there are a lot of people impacted, houses lost. Can you give us a sense of how many people may have been displaced, how many people are relying on food coming in from outside from relief? Have you got any sense of that, or I'm guessing it's way too early, but maybe damage in terms of dollars? Can you give us a sense of the sort of scale of people and property impacted?
Well, from what we know, again, there are a number of communities that were in this path of the storm. And again, we're looking at 5 to 6 that have been severely damaged. What we don't want to do is overlook any of the other communities. In other words, as the communities themselves are assessing, there may be communities that are not necessarily in that category being severely damaged, like Hooper Bay, Scammon Bay, Nome, Gullivan, Newtok. But we don't want to leave out where there may be a latent sewer and water issue that will come to our attention here, hopefully in the next day or two, or some type of road erosion or some type of structure erosion. So, to be honest with you, Sean, those things are coming in as we speak. But we do have people displaced. We do have folks that are still in some of the shelters, whether it's the schools or community centers. We're getting a number on those. But again, we're going to make sure that there's food, water, a roof over people's heads, dry bedding, et cetera. And then we're going to move rapidly to get things back to where they are, pump water out, make sure the airports are working, lights are working, electricity is working. We know that AVAC and others are out right now working on electricity in some of the communities. And so it's going to be a pretty quick response, and it's going to be ongoing until we get this recovery totally taken care of.
Okay, and our last question comes from Margie Bauman at the Cordova Times. Margie?
Yeah, thank you. I have a couple of questions. I was wondering how they're going to provide food sources in areas where the electricity is still out initially. And also another subject nobody's brought up. Quite a few of these communities have sled dogs. And I was wondering how the people that own these sled dogs are doing as far as sheltering the dogs properly and providing food. I don't know if the flooding swamped all their food supplies for the dogs. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we haven't heard of the dogs, Margie. I know that from living out there for almost 20 years, the dogs, property dogs, they're usually moved to higher ground. They're usually dealt with. So I would imagine that those dogs have been staked out where it's a little drier at least. And in terms of the food, we're going to get an assessment across the board as to where the supplies are needed and in what categories. So again, the storm is still active in the northern Seward Peninsula area, the Chukchi area, going up as far as Point Hope. And so these assessments will be coming in over the next couple of days. But again, we've already begun our work. We'll be getting feet on the ground, people on the ground, supplies on the ground, ASAP starting tomorrow. And we'll continue to do assessments on some of the topics that you talked about. So with that, again, I do think it's something to be grateful for that nobody has been severely injured. There's nobody missing that we are aware of at this point, and there's nobody that has died as a result of the storm. We understand that there's significant damage, significant property damage. There is erosion. There is standing water. Airport lights are out in some communities. We also had a fire in Nome at the same time that this storm was happening yesterday. That fire was controlled. Unfortunately, the building was lost. But again, the assessment is key. We're getting more and more information in, and we're putting together the response. The response is going to happen rapidly. That response will start tomorrow, and we're going to focus on communities that absolutely need us ASAP. Again, we're not going to leave any communities out, and we've got people that will be in contact with all the communities that were in the storm path to make sure that there's nothing that we're overlooking. But our response is going to be rapid. It's going to be comprehensive. It's going to be significant, and we're going to make sure we get things up and running and people back on their feet as soon as possible. So we'll continue with the updates, and we'll let you know when the next press conference is going to be. But a lot of the activity for the recovery starts here tomorrow on the ground. So anyway, thank you, Alaska, and we'll keep you updated.